today's rapidly evolving manufacturing landscape, the concept of dark factories is gaining momentum as organizations seek to address critical business, workforce, and operational challenges, driven by the need for greater competitiveness, scalability, and sustainability. Dark factories leverage advanced AI agents and autonomous systems to optimize production, enhance energy efficiency, and enable highly adaptive manufacturing processes. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Analytics Insight podcast, where we talk about the ever evolving tech space. And I'm your host, Priya Dialani. Now, just like the manufacturing industry, the software industry is also undergoing a massive transformation. With AI, automation, and self healing systems, traditional development models are evolving into fully automated dark software factories. Here, AI builds, tests, and deploys software with minimal human intervention. Joining us today is Amit Tyagi, CEO of TrueReach AI, to talk more on dark factory software. Hi, Amit, how are you doing?
Well, I'm good. Thanks for having me here.
Great, Amit. It's a pleasure to have you on our podcast today. And of course, when we listen or hear about dark software factories, there are a lot of things that usually come into one's mind, or even my mind, and I'm sure our listeners would also have a lot of things. So, probably to gain more insights and to understand it appropriately, you will be helping us guide this entire scenario, and we will talk more on it. So let's start by telling our listeners more about the organization, what exactly TrueReach AI is, any kind of specialization it offers. And alongside, we would also like to know more about you, Ahmed. So if you could give us a brief about yourself, your journey till date, what led you to, found TrueReach AI and your current role at the company.
Okay, thanks, Priya. So a lot in the question, so I'll unpack and try to answer. If I miss something, let me know. So I'm your typical IIT IIM grad. So I graduated from IIT in 2005, then I'm Bangalore 2008. Then again, like most regular people, had different roles in IT services. I was actually blessed that I was able to work across a couple of countries, and I think I saw like 5 or 6 industries where my role was working in a specific functions and then leading the functions or the companies or divisions to multi-million dollar businesses globally. Other than that, as a person, I'm actually, my idea is that one should try to experience as much as one can in the life. So both in the job and in outside of work also, I try to get more experiences. For example, I'm a pilot also. I have a flying license. I do paragliding, do scuba diving, etc. Again, all related to experience. That's basically the motto I live by. The genesis of TrueReach actually starts when I had exited my the last startup, which got acquired by Enerock. So in mid 22, basically I was looking at what should I spend the next decade plus of my life on, and I was looking at something that will be very impactful. Incidentally, I met somebody in 22 mid. The person had actually worked on the earliest version of LLMs at AWS Seattle. And I had very interesting meetings with him. I understood basically what LLM's capabilities, even though models were very nascent at the time. And me and my co-founders, we realized that this is something that will fundamentally change every industry as it exists in the world. So we were very bullish on that. We decided that, okay, let's spend our time on that. So in fact, we started our company in November 22. That is 2 weeks before ChatGPT launched and before it became popular. So we got the conviction on GenAI before GenAI was very vogue in the world. And when we started, we realized that while LLMs gives you intelligence, there are two problems that will be needed for anybody to build something that will have economic value. One part will be LLM by nature, and these are neural networks. They will always be give a probabilistic response. So it will never happen that they will have reliability. So we already knew from the start that this problem will happen. The second is that human to machine interaction. And when you're talking to software, it is a deterministic software. So interactions go in certain way. But when you're talking to LLMs, it's again an intelligence you're talking to. So the interaction has to be in a different way. What I mean by that, I'll give you an example. If you want to build a system, you want to take the best of what the artificial intelligence has to offer and what a human has to offer. For example, humans are very good at making decisions, but very bad at writing documents or remembering a lot of information. So interaction has to be in such a way that takes advantage of basically both of these. So these were the two problems we knew that we will have to solve. And we started on the journey. We knew it will be a little longer journey. We focused on coding per se because of two things. One, this is something you can verify easily. There is only one right answer, or rather, you can test and verify that the code or the software or the solution basically is correct. And third, the software is the underpinning of nearly every industry in the world. You know, there's a famous quote that software is eating the world. So we thought that this is the biggest market that will basically come up. So that is why we basically focused on software. And interestingly, I'll tell you, the first vibe coded platform or rather solution that we gave was in July 24. So we did that with Sonnet 3.5, and this was a complete solution where on one side you have an IoT, you had a server backend, and then you basically had a front end. And this is like much before, maybe nearly a year before vibe coding term was even coined. So we were always ahead of the pack when it came to building good software. And in the last year, we were able to finally complete the dark factory. The whole concept is that you just need somebody to define what they need to build, and the dark factory builds the complete solution. And when we say solution, we are talking about front ends, back ends, apps, all working together, deployed, DevOps, everything done without human intervention. And we were actually for one of the biggest apparel brands in India. We deployed this solution, and they got more than $100 million of order on the platform. So we know that Dark Factory basically is working. So that is basically the product that TrueReach AI has right now, which is our dark factory, where you just give in requirement, you get software out. So you can see it's infinitely scalable. The cost advantage is super. And this is something basically that can definitely impact a lot of industries. One of the key things basically that we were able to do in this, which is the linchpin on which everything works on, is LLMs are deterministic by nature. So how do you make the output of LLM, or rather LLMs are probabilistic in nature, I'm sorry. How do you make the outcome of LLM deterministic? So that is the major problem, and I would say the primary IP that we were able to solve, and rest everything, the whole system is basically built on that. I hope I was able to answer your question.
Yes, Amit, and I think that was a very powerful overview. And I really appreciate how you clearly articulated both the organization's vision and your personal contribution to it. And I think that gives us a great foundation to explore the bigger picture now. So, moving ahead, now the universal principle says that all starts with an idea and that imagination is the womb of every invention. Throughout history, we have seen many crazy ideas from back then transform into necessities for us now, such as airplanes, cars, and even autonomous factories nowadays. Now, they were once an imaginary concept. Now they are an objective for many manufacturers. And we are living in an era where such factories have become synonymous with the future of manufacturing, wherein we are turning into concrete projects that are implemented and tested in reality. So, the idea of a dark factory originally came from manufacturing, that is, fully automated production without human presence. What does that concept mean when applied to software development?
That's a very interesting question. So the concept, in fact, applies in Toto here. So like in a dark factory, let's say Toyota's dark factory. I think Toyota pioneered this concept for cars. So you can have multiple models of cars, and what you will initially have is somebody designing the spec and putting it in the factory. But the day-to-day operation of churning the cars was something that factory did without human intervention, including all the QA checks, etc. And at the end of the line, or at the output of the task factory, there will be some humans doing your basic quality check. In software, basically, we have a similar concept for which we are building. We are basically, all you need is a BA, a business analyst, who can put in the requirement. And on the other end, you just need a QA, quality assurance guy, who can see the whole solution working. Rest everything basically will be done autonomously by the GenAI enabled factory itself. So what I mean by that is, again, if you look at SDLC, once you have the requirements done, then the deep specification, high level design, low level design, how the UI would look, how the data will flow, everything will be done in the factory. Then from the specification, a proper sprint plan and task, subtask, PRDs will be created, and in an order where dependency mapping, etc. is taken care of. And from there, then the coding, testing, including regressive testing part, basically will start for the whole solution, again, which includes front end, back end, mobile apps, third party integration, right? It could be sitting on top of existing tech stack, so which is a brownfield, what we call it. So any integration with the current solution also, all these things basically will be taken care of autonomously in the factory. And finally, out comes the complete solution deployed already, let's say on AWS or Azure or on the local system, and the QA does the testing. So this is basically how the whole process translates in software development in this case. And the interesting part is we have actually demonstrated this whole thing hands off in our last project we did for the Indian apparel giant, what I talked about.
Yes, Amit, and I think that's the wonderful perspective that you shared. And I mean, when we hear dark factory, we imagine robots assembling cars in facility and, machines just running 24/7. And when we translate that into software development, it feels even more disruptive. So the big question here is, are we moving towards a world where developers are no longer writing code line by line, but instead supervising these intelligent systems that are, building software for us? So I think everybody has this misconception that with the emergence of dark factory, the role of humans will be eliminated. I think it, on the contrary, it elevates them, ideally, to even more higher order thinking. And my next question is somewhere around, the impact of probably dark factories on the developer's role. Now, when we talk about software development, traditionally it was very linear and rigid. If you had an idea, it would be translated into a detailed document. Designers would turn into visual mockups, and then developers would start writing codes line by line. With the emergence of generative AI, it has kind of changed. It altered how we bring ideas to life. So instead of just describing an app in a document, we can now build a functional prototype almost instantly by describing it in a very natural language to an AI. So if AI writes most of the code, does the developer's role shift from creator to a more system architecture or a validator?
So that is actually correct. And I would say that is not very surprising. When I started my career, I actually worked on assembly language also. So in one of my project where we needed really great performance, so we wrote the code in C, but the processor could not, rather the processor power needed was like 400%. So then we went down to assembly and I actually wrote the code in assembly. That's like the first thing I did out of IIT. So again, the point was nobody writes code in assembly right now. But if you look at the hardware, right, on the hardware, it's the assembly language basically that decides how your logic works, right? And we use a compiler to do that. Nobody is surprised by that. Maybe 1980s people got surprised when that happened. Now, take a bit higher. Basically, you have other languages from C, you went to Java and other things, right? And then, so the whole point was you have more and more abstractions so that you are not getting into the nitty gritty of writing code. You're thinking more about the higher order things, right? But you still need a human because you needed some intelligence, basically, who can look at the specification and figure out, okay, how do you instruct a compiler to actually produce machine level code? That is how I would see it. What has happened now is you have just one more layer of intelligence coming in, where now you don't even need to write the programming language, you just give instructions. In fact, if you ask me, my prediction is that in 3 years, the languages themselves will go and you will be writing the assembly code directly depending on basically what is the hardware on which this is supposed to be run, because that will be superly more efficient both in cost and power perspective than what is happening right now, because the humans is out, so now performance basically has to be increased, right? So in a way, I would say this is a natural thing that will happen as soon as you have artificial intelligence basically coming in, right? So it's a natural progression in that sense. Now the point is, what we have also seen throughout last 30 years is the thing that is most important. Like if you look at startups, right? Startups in the last 20 years, they succeeded and failed less because they couldn't write code, more because they couldn't actually identify the need of customer or what is actually useful for whoever is going to buy the product, right? And that is a tough problem basically to solve. So I believe that is the change that will happen. And again, if I give you another correlate, it's like this. Earlier, before Gen AI, people who knew Adobe software for design, they did very well, even if they did not have such a great design eye. People who had a great design eye, but they did not know how to use that particular tool, they did not do that well. Now, if you see right now, what you actually need is a design eye. So anybody who's great at design, he will be doing very, very well because the dependency on the tool basically moves out. And I would say all the languages that we have right now, they're again like a tool. So because of what we are building and what others are doing, right? People who have very great idea about the market, about their customers, their need, etc., they will be able to basically do much much more than somebody who is able to basically write the code. And in all what happens is people will have much better options both as a consumers, and people will be much more happier to pay for such a product. So overall for the economy it will be actually very good.
Yes, I think that's a very powerful perspective, Amit. And eventually, I think what we are witnessing here is not the disappearance of developers, but the elevation of their role. And and perhaps the bigger shift is accountability. When AI generates code, someone still owns the outcome, the performance, the security, and scalability. And with that, my next question is around, like if when we're talking about AI agents, I think, and when they're integrating them in their daily routine life of software development, developers are feeling the boost in their personal productivity, and more than half report being more satisfied with their jobs as a result. However, this increased velocity has created a new paradoxical situation. While code is being generated faster than ever, the confidence in that code hasn't kept pace. Now, one of the studies show that 96% of developers don't fully trust that AI generated code is fully functional. So I think this massive trust gap highlights a central conflict of AI coding. So Amit, if no human reviews the code, where can we ensure that there is trust, and where does trust come from?
So you're absolutely correct, and we are actually seeing that people's life is evolving more with reviews than actually in writing code because now code writing is more commoditized. But look, as more and more code gets produced, right? The manual review that is happening is basically something that is in transition. The end state, which has to be, is that nobody reviews the code because otherwise there is no benefit of faster production of code. In fact, if I forgot the name of the study, but I was reading it's one study which said even though engineers are producing faster code, the teams are not shipping faster. The rate has not increased because now the bottlenecks has moved to somewhere else to basically the spec design, etc., and also the QA part of it. So the only solution to that is that Gen AI writes the code and Gen AI reviews the code. Of course, the primary challenge there remains the same, that if Gen AI creates the code and Gen AI reviews the code, and Gen AI by design or by nature is probabilistic, how do you know the code is correct? And this is something that I believe this is something we figured out in 2022 itself, that that problem needs to be solved. What most people are doing right now is they are sending for review, they're sending it to five, six agents, and then they're taking a vote, something like a democracy, like, okay, is it correct, not correct, and so on and so forth. Some basic errors you can anyway find out by running some automated tests. So that is the another thing that most people are doing. But the only solution that will work for mission critical software for enterprises is if you are able to make the both the generation and testing of code deterministic. And as I told you, this is our primary IP. That is something that we have been able to do, where it is 100% accurate when it creates the code, and also when it creates the test case, which is done separately, that test cases are also 100% accurate. So it's the solutions like us that will come in the market. And that is when this particular problem will be resolved. But I believe that ultimately the review will have to happen by AI itself. Now, the other question you mentioned about who will take ownership if something goes wrong. And the point here is this is again like a platform. The primary ownership still lies with the CTO. The only thing is the review part moved from lower level, which is coding, to actually reviewing the solutions. So, which means, for example, if we are deploying a solution, for example, let's say for any apparel brand, let's say take Levi's, for example, you're deploying some supply chain solution for them, then the team that is deploying that, they will have to manually check the front end and back end to ensure that basically the whole system works correctly with all the edge cases covered, right? So that is the last mile checking basically that humans need to do. And that will be their responsibility to ensure that the final output works very well. Again, not very dissimilar to what happens in dark factory in Toyota, right? The final check or random check definitely is still done by humans, while each component and the whole machine is individually checked by the machines itself in the factory. So something similar will basically happen here also.
Very well put, Amit. And, I think we are kind of redefining what trust even means in the age of AI generated systems. Because for decades, trust in software came from human oversight, where senior engineering are signing off, there's audit, peer reviews. Now we are entering a world where code can be written, tested, and deployed faster than any human team could manually validate it. And I think it's important that we are moving towards a future where trust is less about manual inspection, but more about measurable reliability over time. Great. I would like,
Absolutely.
yeah. And I would like to dig a little bit deeper in this. Now, I want to understand as a leader, from a leader's perspective. Now, software engineers maintain and advance a lot of these skills through hands-on application, which they get in their day-to-day roles. But when they start outsourcing everything to LLMs and, other agents, particularly in the case of vibe coding, they risk losing the skills they have. Now, to quote an old adage, tech skills are a case of use it or lose it. So, as a leader, how do you think leaders can prevent that skill atrophy when humans stop writing large portions of code?
That's a tough question. In
Yeah.
fact, I remember Andres Carpathy recently posted on X that he is doing these things in January, and he's saying, "I myself feel like I'm losing some of these skills because of that." So that is a real problem. And like I said, look, ultimately the final destination where it will reach is where those skills will not be needed itself, because the Gen-enabled systems will be so deterministic that you will never need to look at that. Same way, nobody looks at machine assembly code right now, right? People know it will be correct. In the meantime, in the flux time, and this flux time could go for even 5 or 10 years, while industry adjusts, this will be a real problem. I don't have a solution, but I have an interesting anecdote about another industry that basically is struggling with this. So in airplane industry, what is happening is because of all the automation, pilots are flying less and less. So they are also having the same problem that manual flying skills are basically getting diminished. And sometimes it is worse also because when autopilot goes off, it's because something is wrong. And that is when you need to have basically a top of your game with your skills. But unfortunately, that is the time basically suddenly it gives to you and you don't have enough skill or you don't remember or you not practice that. So that's the challenge that airline industry is also facing. Their solution for that problem is that they keep asking pilots to hand fly sometimes and not always depend on automation. So I think in the Flux, something similar can be done where while the enterprise application, because of the need for speed and quality, they may be using some basically Gen AI enabled tool, agent, or platforms like us. But on the side projects, hobby projects, etc., they still hand code to a large extent so that the skills are intact. I don't know how many people will actually take that advice, even if it is given, but that to me seems like the only viable solution, while basically the whole thing adjusts toward complete Gen AI SDLC.
Yes, Amit, I think that makes a lot of sense because I think this is how the new leadership era muscle should be, because designing systems where engineers still think deeply, review rigorously, and build foundational skills, even if they aren't, typing every line themselves. And I think we're all moving from code producers to more system thinkers, and organizations that win maybe the ones that intentionally create fiction and code reviews or even manual drills to keep that technical sharpness alive, because I think ultimately AI can assist execution. It can assist you in all of the execution, but code judgment and debugging under uncertainty, I think that still belongs to humans.
Yeah, and I want to add here, look,
Sure.
the part which is very interesting is, look, the initially people said that AGI will come, nobody is talking about that. So that part is away. But the interesting part is this. So, for example, we have a factory that produces the complete solution. Now, somebody will build something that does the same for marketing, somebody will do for operations, somebody will do for some other functions. Now, what happens if for a company you just have 5, 10 such sort of factories, if I may connect them, so what do you have? Do you have like a macro hard, which is what Elon Musk is saying that, a whole company where nobody works? It's a very interesting thought experiment and very interesting thing to look out for in future.
Yes, I agree with you, Amit. And I think to wrap up the conversation, I mean, I think in the years to come, we will see more of these advancements where software can build itself entirely. So, moving ahead, how do you think, what would be the roles of humans eventually in engineering, or how do you see the future of AI and human collaboration?
So I think we've actually seen that movie. If you have seen any of the Marvel movies with Jarvis, I think that is basically the end goal where you may have a personal Jarvis or even at enterprise level Jarvis, and human beings are just making decisions that this needs to be done, that needs to be done, not from a technical perspective, but from a market, customer, other perspectives. And then there's a complete systems with Gen AI that actually takes hours, days, or months to actually finish that. And that could be enterprise project, that could be research projects. Because look, the basic thing is this: before Gen AI, we did not have native intelligence outside of humans that can actually think. Now it comes with its own hallucination, but human beings also hallucinate actually. So it's not very different that way. But now you have that intelligence. And if you have a system to really harness that intelligence and use it for a large amount of time, then you can basically create and scale 1,000 people companies today, move them to 10 people, then 1,000. So the amount of work that sort of company can do, basically this sort of company can also do. So everybody, including coders, have to move to a place where the skills, which are the coding skills, the sprint planning skills, and some of these skills, basically, they will be of not much value. But other skills, in terms of, for example, understanding industry, understanding customer, and other things, will be of much, much more value. So that is where they will need to upgrade themselves to. That change in the role would basically happen. And in fact, if I may, it is not very different than what happened to servers. I think in early 2000s, for a lot of companies, servers was a big problem. There used to be big teams managing servers. What happens now? You have one person managing all your, or maybe even half person managing DevOps, which is all your servers or AWS or Azure. He still needs to take care of these things, but he doesn't need to look at, okay, I need to enable this server, disable that server, or all these things. He has also moved to higher level. I think something similar will happen to coders.
Yeah, Amit, and I think as we wrap up, I think we stand on the precipice of a new era, one in which the realms of human ingenuity and machine capabilities converge in unprecedented ways. It is clear that the future of software development will be defined by a rich and dynamic collaboration between human developers and AI systems. This journey, while filled with challenges and complexities, holds immense promise for driving innovation, enhancing productivity, and unlocking new frontiers of human potential. Thank you so much, Amit, for taking out the time and effort to be on a podcast today and giving us insights that the future of human AI collaboration in software development is one that holds immense potential and promise, but also demands a collective commitment to responsible leadership, ethical conduct, and a shared vision for leveraging these technologies for the greater good of humanity. Thank you, Amit, for your insights. It was lovely talking to you.
Thanks, Priya. It was lovely talking to you too.
Thank you, Amit. So, this is for our listeners. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion around dark software factories. What is the future that we are going to see? The fusion of human and machine, and where we get a more deeper understandings of ourselves, as well as we should be boldly enough to embrace the frontiers of the unknown. Thank you so much for listening. Stay tuned for our upcoming podcasts, and you can view all our previous episodes on Spotify and other leading platforms. Thank you so much.